Nawaraya pakitwa satyate yatra umakitwa yasitra umakitwa yasitwa hey. Namaste, greetings, beloved ones. Welcome to the Sunrise Sessions. And today we're going to talk about how to deal with conflicts in relationship at this time on Earth. And we feel this is a very important topic as the energy of conflict arises more and more. And it is important, as always, to, when possible, as the human, it's never going to be perfect. The human is imperfectly perfect and perfectly imperfect. But it is always important, firstly, when possible, when you regain your sense of self, is to zoom out, expand your awareness, take a step back, take a break, move away, or get a broader perspective on the circumstance. And again, when the heat is on, I'm sure everyone at some time has had conflict or words or experiences when the intensity takes over. Life on Earth is intense. Life on Earth is a challenge. And relationships on life on Earth is like next level challenge. It is what defines us, really. Our relationship to everything, really. Our relationship to the earth, our relationship to each other, our relationship to animals, our relationship to what it is we are experiencing. It really defines our human experience. And so today we're going to talk about dealing with conflict in a way. We're going to give the broad perspective, but we're also going to give definite, clear, tangible, and actionable experiences for the human, for the being, for the one that is going through the experiences, the conflict, the challenges. Because giving the non-dual expression, and only giving the non-dual expression or innerstanding or gnosis, is one half of the human experience. It's the whole. It's the truth. It's the absolute. It is how it is. But if we were always in that knowing, there would never be conflict. There would never be even an experience of other. There's a little boat passing by. Don't know if it'll catch it in the camera. So in the Hermetic philosophies, it talks about the half-wise, and that's where knowing the mental nature of the universe, the practitioner stops there and denies all reality. A little dog is just checking me out here, seeing what I'm doing. And so if we just stop, if we just stop with that understanding, we become the half-wise. We deny reality completely. Again, we come from this understanding into the relative reality, into the conflicts, into the relationship challenges, into the beautiful rising and falling of waves, into the day, into the night, into the sunrise, into the sun just come on cue there. So we do begin with that always. We begin with the absolute awareness that there is no others, there is no you, there is no me, there is no world. To come from that awareness then into, as we did with the aperture yesterday, into the absolute. Then the absolute doesn't actually limit itself, but it gives itself the experience of this so that we can have this beautiful experience called human, called life, called bodies, called world. So how do we deal with conflicts? So we begin with the non-dual absolute awareness. Now how do we deal with conflicts? So we take our knowing of that and bring it into any experience that we are having as a person. So the person has conflict with another person. So we take the knowing that the first step we can take is knowing that this apparent other person is me. It's an aspect of me. Because there is only one, there is a whole. So this conflict that I'm having with this other is a conflict I am having with myself. Now, There's ways that this can everything can get distorted. Humans are masters of distortion. There's ways that this can get distorted into an unhealthy way of blaming and shaming and guilt and these ways. No, we're taking the broadest expression. Everything is an expression of me. Everything is an aspect of the one self as I am. And so when we find ourselves in a conflict, we can bring that first, knowing that this is an aspect of me, but not using that as an absolute way to guilt or shame yourself. You've done something wrong. If I'm having conflict, I'm doing something wrong. I need to blame, shame. This is where it falls down. No, there's one aspect of there is only one self, and it's expressing itself as the many. It's expressing itself as different beings, and I have one particular perspective of that, and this apparent other has another perspective of that. And so when there is conflict, there is polarity. So conflict comes when one perspective, looking from this side, sees and clashes and conflicts with someone looking at the other perspective. And the intensity of that conflict comes from the degree to which one side is polarized, the degree of their polarization, and the degree of the polarization of the other. So the absolute black and white, right, wrong, good, evil, they're the extremes of polarization, and so they're actually the same thing looked at from different perspectives. So you can give this example like hot and cold. You could say very hot and very cold, but they're actually just relative. When does hot become cold? If you're shifting by degrees, when does cold become hot? They're just different degrees of the same experience. And you could say in degrees Celsius, when 1 degree becomes 0 degrees, water starts to turn into ice, and then it becomes colder, and then you go minus degrees. You could say that, but is that an absolute truth, or is it a relative truth? If you live in some place where, let's say some place in Canada where it gets minus 20, is 0 degrees cold? If you live in the Bahamas, is 0 degrees cold? You see, everything is relative. North, west, south, east. Where do these make any sense? Only on Earth and only from your perspective. If I'm sitting at the South Pole looking north, I'm looking north. If you're sitting at the North Pole looking south, you're looking south. But what happens if I'm looking from inside the Earth looking outwards? Where's north and south go then? What happens if I'm on the outside of the Earth looking towards Earth? What happens to north, south, east, west? They're all relative things. And we don't deny them. It's handy to use these things in relative reality when we're in these physical bodies. So this is just to explain polarization. So in a conflict, 2 or more sides are in conflict because they are seeing polarization. They are seeing one issue from different perspectives. And so if we can see that other being or beings is a part of us, and that all they're doing is showing us another perspective of the same thing, we can begin to diffuse that. So whenever we get into absolutes of right and wrong and good and evil, then the polarizations are so far apart, it's hard, it's a challenge to bring them together. But the war in the world is representative of the war inside the inner worlds of the humans living on that world. So when you end the war within, the war without no longer needs to be expressed. So as we are seeing conflict on the wider scale in the world, we are being called as an expression and as a microcosm of that macrocosm to begin to see where are we polarizing into absolute right, absolute wrong. In the book, The Life of Bliss Living Transmission, and then to talk about right and wrong, good and evil is like black and white, and they're inviting us into infinite shades of grey. So infinite shades of grey between black and white. And this is an easy way to tangibly bring it there. So let's say we're in a conflict. We see something a certain way, and as is the human nature, we believe if we get into a conflict, generally it's because we believe something is right. And that conflict will be with another that believes that they're right. And the conflict arises from opposing beliefs believing that they're right. Now, when a conflict arises, first thing to do, if we can, again, ideal scenario is straight away go to the big picture. In practicality, everyone, except probably a few masters, will get to that point. But more and more, it's possible. With consciousness, it's possible. With removing oneself from one's own drama, it is possible. And I'm seeing it more and more. But in practicality, in human life, in intensity, it's more than likely that when we get in, and again, in conflict, we can go from all by degrees as well. A conflict could be just a very, simple thing that you have with your children or your partner, and then conflict at the highest scale goes to like war and murder that we're seeing across the planet now. So, and again, we don't try and fix the macrocosm. The macrocosm is revealing what is alive within the human collective. We don't try and fix the microcosm either, but we see that is where our only power lies. Our power of influence, our sphere of influence is within the microcosm that is my direct experience. So where do I have conflict? And whenever I do have conflict, can I see the bigger picture? If I get overwhelmed and get stuck in this story and can't get there right away, that's fine. Whenever I can, you want to step back, remove yourself from the circumstance for a time being, and actually get some space, get some time, get distance from it. Same as when we talked about the horizon yesterday, you get some distance from it, it expands with you. It's not a fixed line. So, ideal scenario, getting the bigger picture. The reality for most, I would say, is that you'll get lost at some times, at least sometimes. You'll get in the story, you get into some form of conflict. And as early as possible, bringing awareness, bringing consciousness, bringing presence to what is appearing here, seeing that this is just a polarization of one being or beings seeing one. Let's just say, using the hot and cold example because it's tangible, one seeing hot is right and another seeing cold is right. So if we can take the space and see that, given in the example, is 0 degrees Celsius cold in Alaska, or is 0 degrees cold in the Bahamas, in the tropics? So you see the conflict. So the other side is vehement that they're right, you're vehement that you're right. And even if everything within you believes that what you see, what you feel is right, be okay with the duality, be okay with the polarity, and see that conflict does not bring your rightness into righteousness. It doesn't make you more right. The human ego wants to be right. It loves to be right. It wants to be proven correct. It wants to know that what it believes is so is what is so. And it's bound in competition, and it's bound in protection of itself. And being right to the ego is like life and death sometimes. And we all have it to some degree. And the more degree of presence we can bring, the less it will affect, and the less, I'm not going to say the less conflicts that we will have, because duality and polarity are intrinsic to this human experience. But if we can begin with smaller things, begin with this smaller conflicts, begin with the little conflicts you have within yourself, there's a real mastery. How many times do you have thought forms that one moment say one thing and the next moment say another? In one circumstance or state of being, something is beautiful. In another state of being, that someone or something is the opposite. We deal with these little internal conflicts. Start with the ones that don't have the strongest charge first and build our way up. See, can we get the biggest picture? We fall at the first hurdle, is fine. See how quickly we can remove ourselves, give ourselves a bigger picture. see that everything within this conflict, it's not an absolute right or wrong. It's degrees of experience looking at something from two different perspectives. And then when we can get that, we can dissolve that conflict by not identifying with our position as right, and just either removing ourselves or just accepting that what we know to be true and what we know to be right within our being doesn't discount someone else's opposing view that they hold to be right and they hold to be true. We can still stay true to our truth without denouncing or denying or fighting or trying to get someone else to agree with us. So we can deal with the conflict by staying true to what we know is true, but without the need of any other agreeing with us, and actually accepting wholeheartedly that someone else or maybe the whole world disagrees with you, but you know it's to be true. You can stay true to it without having to convince anyone. When you know something is true within your heart, it doesn't matter if everyone else disagrees with it. It doesn't matter if everyone violently opposes what you know to be true. When you know it's true, it doesn't matter if anyone else disagrees. When you really know what is true, everybody else could say that that is false and you are still as you are. That's the biggest picture. But if we start to apply this to the small conflicts that we have within ourselves, then next level is moving up to the smaller conflicts that we have with other beings. That could be as simple as out on the road and you get that little road ragey feeling, whatever it happens to be. It could be someone doesn't hold the door for you. It could be someone is rude to you when you're at a shop or something. That's a big one for me. I don't know why. I have to work on that one a lot. When someone that works in a place of like serving people, it really gets me. Wow, I have a lot of work on that one. So we can use that, taking that step up, and then we can move. We do it baby step by baby step, getting the bigger picture, seeing it's just by degree, and how to, each conflict will be unique. But if we can get bigger picture, seeing first bigger picture, removing ourselves, seeing that it's not an absolute right or wrong doesn't mean just because what we believe is right, it means that it's right. If someone else can see an opposing view, then we can begin to see, okay, can we see? If we absolutely cannot see the other being's point of view, it's just like absolutely so far away from where we are that we just can't see even how that this conflict is happening. We can begin to ask the question, can we see how that being could come to that idea? Through trauma, through experiences that you don't even know, can we find a way as to how this being or beings could come to that idea that is the complete opposite to the idea that you have? And if we can put ourselves in another's shoes, if we can see through another's eyes, conflict will no longer have its disguise. It will no longer have its hold upon us. Because again, we don't need to convince the other that it is right, but if we can understand how they could come to an opposing view, then we are back in our power. Because we can understand that, then we can dissolve that conflict by just allowing it to be, by seeing how they could come to that experience. And then if we really cannot come to understand how they could have that, if we really can't, we must remove ourselves. We must remove ourselves for that. And so now the question will come, and this is very important at this time. Whenever there is something that we know to be true within our heart of hearts, and we are challenged by that, by the opposite, and that has a direct, literal, let's say, we have a direct experience seeing someone physically hurting or harming another, and we have a direct influence and potential to influence that. What do we do in that conflict? Do we go to the bigger picture? Ideally, yes. But in a circumstance where we have direct physical influence to change the experience of someone hurting another, let's say someone less, someone vulnerable, someone more powerful, hurting or harming, I mean actual physical harm or abuse of some form, what do? We don't need to philosophize with that. We know when we know what is right, the actions will arise spontaneously. We still, as much as possible, hold the bigger picture. We still, as much as possible, see how this could possibly happen. But when we're in an actual, literal, physical, abusive or dangerous experience, actions will take on themselves. But as soon as possible, after that action is taken, we want to get to the bigger picture. We want to get to understand how that be and not carry that into the future. And why this is so important now is because the instances of that happening in our lives are minute. It is, if you took everybody's lives as an average of all the beings on all the planet, the people that are in constant danger and constant physical abuse and threat and these things, it's a very, very small amount. It's not that they're not there, they absolutely are. But for the vast majority of people, they are not in those actual circumstances. But what's happening as the light enters, what's happening is because of media, social media, because of news, because of propaganda, because of many different things, people's experience is being hijacked to believe and to experience that that's what they are experiencing, watching the pain and suffering, and some manipulated and some actual and real. Not denying that there is, absolutely there is suffering and hurt of people. But what is happening, that gets magnified by the energy that would seek to divide us, that would seek to rule us, that seeks to put us against each other, that feeds, literally feeds off our conflict with each other. And so that is magnified, so it really feels like we are in that actual experience. Because when you see like graphic videos, when you see constant news, negative news, and you see war and you see hurt and abuse and murder, when you see that amplified, your being, your mind reacts to that as if it's actual, literal, real in front of you. I'm not saying that there isn't actual, there is. But what is happening is we're reacting as if it's a literal thing in front of us that we can have a literal physical intervention with. This has been multiplied, and it's done deliberately to put us in a state of fight, flight, fear, and so that we give this energy. Like I could say, I watched a video yesterday, horrible video. It just popped up. Again, I actually deleted the app. It was Twitter app. Because I'd been completely off social media for a while, and this video just popped up randomly, and it was horrible violence. And in the like as I was watching it, like tears started coming to my eyes, and my reaction to that, there's two sides of this. The empathy of seeing hurt, harm, or damage to others is a natural response, but then but a response, let's say, to defend, attack, like in a literal sense, is being amplified by these things. And it was horrible. It was really horrible. And I felt it in that moment. And so I had to remove myself from it completely so that I can be part of the solution to this, not part of the problem. Because this constant bombardment of violence, of fear, it just puts us in that state where we, again, the example that was given, when we're in a literal experience, actions will happen on their own. When we're in these virtual experiences, that energy is stirring up inside of us. That energy is becoming something that is destructive, damaging. And that's played out then in, so you see something that's happening on the other side of the world that's horrible. It's literally horrible. It's literally people being hurt and harmed, and children being hurt and harmed. And then you internalize that, and you internalize what is right, what is wrong. It's very obvious. It's not, again, you don't need to philosophize on what is right, what is wrong, what is harmful to beings. But then we internalize that, and that's something that's happened actually, it's something that's happening in our consciousness we see on a screen. Again, not denying that there are those things happening, there are. but there is manipulation, and there is an expansion of that energy, and there is a it's how do we say it? It is, the volume is turned up to its highest level on that, on social media and news and all of that, because bad news and fear sells. It's a manipulation of the human egoic tendency to look for danger, and then how that affects you. You know, something could be happen that could be manipulated or not, could be real or not, but you watch that, and then that seeps into your actual physical relationship with someone who's not even seen that, but your workmate at work has a differing view, and then that explodes. Then that virtual experience that has been visits your family or visits your workplace or visits your community. So it's so important to see this microcosm, to take these steps of beginning with inner conflict, using these steps that we're given here to dissolve these inner conflicts. Then whenever we see, because it's nearly impossible to avoid these things, and I don't think it's necessary to avoid, but we choose what our vibration is, we choose what we choose to consume. And because when we are consuming social media, news, fear, propaganda, we are literally being consumed. Our energy is being consumed by an energy that feeds on fear, on anger. And every time I start talking about this, the stream messes up, so I don't care. If it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's literal energy that feeds on fear, that feeds on anger, that feeds on human conflict. And this feeds, it literally is, that's its food. And it, whenever you have a little argument within yourself, it's consuming you. Whenever you have an argument or conflict with someone outside of you, be that mental or physical or literal, it's feeding on that energy. And it implants thoughts, emotions, feelings. This energy is what's behind every conflict on this planet and beyond this planet. This energy feeds on fear, feeds on anger, feeds on conflict, and it uses this. It has no ability to create. It only has the ability to influence thought and emotion. So it has the ability to implant thought or put all of this disgusting, horrible stuff on social media, news, and all other ways that it can, puts it in front of us, and then we have the ability to interact with that and feed it, or we have always the ability and choice to do whatever we so choose. But sometimes it can overtake us, and it happens to this one, it happens to others. Do not be consumed by feeding this energy. Find the conflict within oneself, dissolve it, find your own way to remove yourself from it, get the bigger picture, see the other side. And it's very difficult to see the other side when you see these horrific images. But if you've ever lived in a war zone, you live in a place where there's conflict, you will talk to both sides, and both sides will give you two different sides. But very few people do that. Very few people have seen that. I lived in a small version of that, so I've seen it and lived in a certain way, and then got out of it and seen different sides and was able to speak to the quote other side. Not to the extremes of what we're being shown, but what's happening is that this energy, and especially news and social media, magnifies one side for outrage, magnifies, and it doesn't matter which side, it doesn't care. It's not about right or wrong for it. The energy feeds on both sides. Its food is anger, is fear, is lack, is loss, is limitation, all of these things. So it doesn't care. As long as conflict, anger, war, all of these things arise, that energy feeds. So it's up to each of us individually whether we continue to feed that or we starve it. And you know how we starve it? We starve it with love. We starve it with love. It is indigestible. Love is indigestible to it. And I'm not going to say that this energy is evil or wrong or bad. It's just lost. It's just forgotten. It's forgotten its source. It believes it is separate from its source. So all of these separation-based energies of anger, fear, war, hatred, judgment are its food because it has no sustenance of its own. We are all fed by love. Love is our source. Love is our sustenance. Love is our being. And this energy and the way it influences other beings is because it believes it's separate from its source. It's separate from love. It doesn't have the ability to create. It only has the ability to miscreate and to misappropriate and to use trickery and to use sorcery and magic and ritual, and uses all of these things to get us separate from our source by getting us in conflict, by dividing and ruling. All of these ways in which it uses it's to feed. It's it's so empty that all it can do is feed on fear, anger, all of these things. So we are love. We are pure love. The next time you see some of this horrible conflict being pushed at you, it just pops up at random, just put your hand on your heart and say, I am pure love. I am pure love. I am pure love. And this is not bypassing. This is absolute truth. And we love that energy that so believes itself to be separate from its source that it has to feed on anger and fear. We love that. But you know what? It can't love love. It cannot love love. Love is indigestible. Love cannot feel. It cannot feel love. It cannot be with love. Love is indigestible. So we love that energy. We love everyone and everything, and we are the love. And whenever we fall off and forget, that's okay too. And whenever we remember again, we come back to, I am love. I am pure love. I am pure love. So this is how we deal with every conflict that there ever has been. Love. And of course, as I got there and as the energy rose, the stream dropped. And there was people on viewing and the stream dropped. So thank you, little rascal. I know, little rascals, I know this energy that you cannot, it's not your favorite meal, but we love you anyway. We love you because we are you and you are us. And just because you've forgotten, and we forget sometimes, doesn't mean that you are not what you are. There is only love. So how to deal with every conflict of every time, every type, is love. We are love. I am love. You are love. Everything and every being that is affected by conflict, and all the beings that are influencing, manipulating, and encouraging conflict are love. Love is all there is. Until next time, from my heart to yours, the divine in me sees, honors, and loves the divine in you. Namaste. We